Today's episode of Stablepilled is brought to you by Limited, the global business banking platform built for founders in the US, Latin America, APAC, who operate across borders. Limited makes international scale seamless. You can open a US bank account for US or non-US entities and accept funds locally with the accounts in the EU, Mexico, Brazil, and the UAE. They support cross-border payouts in over 80 currencies across 300 local payment methods. And your team gets premium Visa cards shipped globally that can be used anywhere. I'm trying them out so far, and I found their method for converting money between fiat and crypto very easy, which I can tell you is not the case with many products I've tried in the past. So stop letting legacy banking slow down your growth. Go to limitedapp.com and unlock borderless banking today. All right, on to the show. We are excited today to have another episode of Stablepilled. Today we have Alfred Nader, the CEO of Mark Lane, who is running a new FX startup with a plethora of experience in FX in the past. How's it going today, Alfred?
Hey there. Thanks for having me. It's going well.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to. Tell the listeners about what your business does and why you're doing it.
Yeah, definitely. So Mark Lane, the idea for Mark Lane was started, in the back of my mind in 2024, 2025. But essentially what we're doing is that we're taking a business model that's used in another industry, in the wealth management industry, and we're applying it to B2B foreign exchange. So a lot of people don't think about international payments and foreign exchange, but that's really the foundation of global commerce. Today, the majority of businesses are using their banks, but there are several multi-billion-dollar companies that are non-banks and focus solely on this niche. And the individuals that manage those relationships, we feel, are underpaid, underutilized, and frankly, unhappy. And we launched in Canada with, again, a wealth management model similar to Merrill Lynch, Charles Schwab, Edward Jones, Raymond James, where the individual who is responsible for the relationships with the clients, with obtaining new clients, for retaining clients, they own the clients and they work under the Mark Lane umbrella, and we take care of licensing, compliance, operations, infrastructure, everything. And they're able to essentially have an out-of-the-box foreign exchange solution. So we started in Canada. Our plans are to get the proof points that we needed, and then move into the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe, mainland Europe, and in Australia, within the next few years. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to think about kind of the business model of foreign exchange. Often on our show, we're talking about some of the technology and some of the challenges around some of that technology in other places. What kind of insights did you have that brought you to want to work on this new business model?
Yeah, so I've spent my entire career in this industry, right? In the foreign exchange, cross-border payments, some domestic payment space. So starting, I guess 2000 was when, I was hired for my first job managing some corporate accounts and their foreign exchange exposure. My last two stops were I was the president at OFX, which is an Australian-based cross-border payment company, publicly traded. And then before that was Western Union, where I ran Latin America and the Caribbean for its B2B arm. And I've done a little bit of everything in the space, from front office, from back office. The only department I've never sat in, although I met with them frequently, was compliance. So anything related to infrastructure or, local competition, I can talk about.
Okay. And what from that experience, you're doing well, why go do a startup?
Yeah, I ask myself that every day. It's I'm not a young man, right? I go to some of these meetups, and some of these, gentlemen who are brilliant, by the way, but some of them can be my children, right? You're in a corporate career, and then you come to a moment where you realize, am I going to be a career executive with a nice, vesting schedule and, a seven-figure income and be unremarkable? Or do I take this moment in my life where, financially, I'm able to step away a bit and have a little bit of comfort, and then just throw myself into something that I think can change the industry, right? So you come to that crossroads in life, and I took the road less traveled, right? And that's where my company name actually comes from. So Mark Lane comes from a Robert Frost poem where he says, it's the famous poem, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So road, path, lane, Mark Lane, control your destiny, choose your own path. But I've been doing this for so long that I see the companies make the same mistakes over and over and over again. You go through a moment of industry consolidation, and then little companies, start off from those consolidations because people are miserable and leave, or people are taken for granted. And I just decided, you know what, enough. I am going to create an ecosystem where those that are responsible for the revenue have a place to stay for their entire career. And that's what we're doing.
Interesting. So it's a mix of a personal inflection point, some poetry, which, to be honest, we don't hear a lot about poetry on this podcast, so that's fun. And then also seeing a new way for the business to work for the people who help bring in revenue.
Yeah. Look, well, first of all, with the poetry, I'm the son of Brazilian immigrants, so you're going to see a little bit more romance coming out of me than you may. But I have actual experience. I've been on the other side of what acquisitions do to employees. I've sat in the salesperson's chair. I've sat in the C-suite. I know everything that's taking place. I'm able to tell people all over the world what the playbook of their company is. I know what it's like to have commissions held back for no reason. I know what it's like to have commission plans changed overnight. I know what it's like to be acquired by a larger company. And, I'm putting all of that into a company that's doing things differently.
Nice. Very cool. I love founders who are kind of found a pain point that they've either lived or seen all the sides of. I think that's always a really good model for a business. So, zooming out from just the exact business you're doing, what are the trends you're seeing in FX that you think are relevant today? The dynamics, is it in a consolidation phase? I'm curious. I think one of the things that we come into this as from the stablecoin side is we know something about technology and how rates can improve, but we don't always have the whole picture of the industry. So tell me a little bit about the story and the state of FX today.
Yeah, so it's definitely going through a period of consolidation, right? There's one major non-bank player that's going out gobbling up everyone, very successfully, I might add. And there's a couple smaller ones that are getting together just to have that power. Another piece is that banks who have long ignored the small, medium-sized side of the business, they're starting to improve their payment infrastructure. So you're seeing more of that. You're seeing a lot of use of local payment rails. So in the United States, ACH, and now RTP as that gets rolled out. The RTP version of Canada is getting enhanced next year to allow for larger size transactions, and you're seeing that around the world. But with stablecoins, and this is where you and I really had some fun conversations. A lot of people start to talk about stablecoins as the foreign exchange killer. And what I told you was, and I'll repeat that again, is that stablecoins are wonderful. I use stablecoins, but for trade, which it hasn't quite picked up yet, if you're making a payment from Bolivia to Madagascar, stablecoins are amazing, right? But if I'm making a payment from the United States to Canada, or from Canada to Europe, or from England to Japan, there are providers that are able to get money there in moments. I'm able to move money, just as an example, within Canada and the United States in moments, and just as cheaply, if not cheaper, than using stablecoin. Where I see the benefit for stablecoin, and this really hasn't picked up yet, is on the treasury side of things. The companies that do really well in this space, and I'll point to Wise as a great example. They're great orchestrators of money, right? They keep money around the world. So while a client may think they're sending money to Europe, behind the scenes, all Wise is doing is moving money from a Euro account to another euro account, and it's almost instantaneous. And as far as treasury management is concerned, for me, it's wonderful because I am not limited by times. I'm able to do things on the weekends if I want, or late at night. If the U.S. has a holiday, I don't really need to worry too much about the ability to get counterparties involved. I'm able to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And those that adopt stablecoin as an infrastructure play, I think will be very dangerous in this space.
So let's go a little deeper into that. So you're saying Wise is using stablecoins to avoid having to move money across borders, or that's all happening in fiat?
No, I believe, again, I don't work for Wise. My understanding is that Wise uses fiat. So what Wise does is that they have clients in Europe and they have clients in the United States, as an example. If an American client is sending money to Europe, they're giving them US dollars and they're expecting euro to be delivered, right? But what Wise does very well is that they have local bank accounts all over the world. So for me, I'm sending a cross-border transfer, but for them, they're sending a domestic transfer, which, with instant SEPA is, in moments, and the price is in the pennies, right? For Wise, because their volume is so large. But even if your volume isn't very large, you're able to be well under $1 for a transaction if you're using local rails. What stablecoins give me the power to do is to be able to get very fast settlement so that I can move money faster. So if I am buying stablecoins and I'm able to buy Brazilian real, for example, I can deposit my Brazilian real in my account and send out payments via Pix so that, our beneficiaries are receiving their payments in moments. Instead of me having to buy Brazilian real, have to wait have to wait 2 days for the value date, have them transfer the Brazilian real into my account, and then start to disperse. That way, it's immediate, right? And that's the companies that use stablecoins properly are going to be able to give their clients, both consumers and companies, a better experience.
Right. Okay. So it's not so much for somebody like Wise in the scenarios that you understand it today, but it's more in these emerging markets and more around settlement speed.
It doesn't even need to be emerging markets. It can be developed markets as well. If you're a Wise, you're huge. You're able to have that banking infrastructure. But for me, for a startup, I can actually come in and compete directly with a Wise or any other large company because stablecoin allows me to operate a lot more efficiently, without having to have, capital sitting, unused all over the world. It's for me, that's where it is. Do I think stablecoin will be adopted by every single business? I personally don't. Do I think that it will double and triple in usage? 100%. The moment you start to see businesses start to accept stablecoin, that's when you're going to see a huge ramp. But for us, when we're talking with our clients, we're telling them that stablecoins are available. The other day, I'm going to give you a perfect example. We had a Canadian client that needed money for a dividend payment, right? But the U.S. markets were closed because of the holiday last Friday. The Canadian company was not able to move that money for 2 days because of that. If stablecoin had been used, we would have been able to just place it into our account and distribute the money a lot faster so that the money would actually be able to be moved. So you're not hindered by bank holidays or after hour times.
That sounds kind of like a nice to have. It wasn't something that, made it so that they were so perturbed that they had to make stablecoins part of their journey today. Is that sort of how you see it, or do you see it as more urgent?
You know what? Like it's just for us. Yeah, I do see it that way because the word stablecoin isn't quite understood yet, right? People think cryptocurrency, they think Bitcoin and whatever they've read about it. And then, you start thinking about all these meme coins, and then you're bringing in another stable coin. And it's a moment of education, right? We need to educate the market and our clients about how stablecoin can actually move faster. In this example, if the client had access to stablecoin, we could have done a transaction and we could have sent out his dividends for him. But it's just a matter of showing him look, this is a perfect example of when stablecoin can be used. And their clients, they're able to say, hey, you can pay us in US dollars, or if you want, you can pay us in the USDC. Which do you prefer? And I liken it to when China started to internationalize the Chinese renminbi, right? For decades, China only accepted payments. Chinese manufacturers only accepted payments in the U.S. dollar, and China all of a sudden started, in the late 2000s, started to accept the Chinese renminbi, and it had to do with the Chinese manufacturer telling their clients that they now accept payment in the Chinese renminbi. And it's a very similar, I think, journey that companies can use when they're trying to expand their stablecoin offering.
Interesting. Although that one was, kind of government promoted. So it seems a little different here that it's going to need a really burning need because there's not going to be a government necessarily pushing for this Canadian firm to do a dividend on a Friday instead of waiting 2 more days or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, do people need money overseas immediately? Sometimes, right? Sometimes it's an emergency and you absolutely need it. But if you are using your cash properly, right, you want it to be working for you as long as possible. So with stablecoins, I'm able to wait until the last moment to make a payment. And I think eventually corporates will appreciate the fact that we'll be able to say, and we're not quite there yet across the world, but we'll be able to say, look, we can send your money to Japan while you're still on the phone with us and you're on the phone with your accounting department over there. I mean, like, that's the world that we're moving towards. And the financial institutions that utilize stablecoin will be able to do that a lot better than those that are only using fiat.
But today, are you guys using it much, or it's sort of future for you guys?
No, it's we are using it for some currencies, but it's a tiny minority, right? Okay. It's something that in about a month, you'll see an announcement coming from us about. I just don't want to ruin it just yet, so just look out for it. But you'll be seeing us, because in order for my business to be able to compete with banks and these multi-billion-dollar companies, I need to be as efficient as possible, and I need to scale, right? And the way that I am saying that I'll be able to scale is going to be through stablecoin. We'll be able to be a lot more nimble in moving our money around. Today, I can point at a number of companies in my space who have been around for decades and tell them, for example, I can get money to Brazil faster than that company, that company, that company. It's because I'm using stablecoin. Right? The recipient gets their fiat currency. It's just my treasury management is just using stablecoin to hasten things.
Nice. Okay. And so in terms of the improvements, then it's a speed improvement you're mainly going for when you say you'll be more efficient, or is it cost as well?
Of course it's cost.
Okay.
It's a volume play. Now, the thing that's interesting is, and I think the CEO of Airwallex made a comment about this. Once you have scale, right, you're able to get, 1 or 2 pips off of the screen, right? Off of what you're seeing, the interbank rate, what banks are trading with each other. So the savings aren't that dramatic for the big players. But for a startup, right, if I'm able to save 2 pips on my euro trades or whatever currency trade, then it is cheaper. And I'm able to pass that along to our clients. But what the gentleman from Airwallex was saying is that it's not cheaper for him to send stablecoin versus fiat, because he already gets very good pricing. It's just a matter are they passing along their savings to their clients? I'll let him tell you that. And but that's something that for me, I'm looking at as speed, and I'm looking at it as cost, and that will give me a competitive advantage, because it's not like I'm going out there and talking about how I'm using stablecoin, because the client doesn't really care about how I'm moving money from one place to the other, just as long as the euro, the yen, the pound, or whatever arrives when I'm saying it's going to arrive. And if I'm able to tell them I can get it there for you cheaper and faster than what your bank is doing, we're going to be getting a lot of clients.
And so at a volume level, they have negotiated these great deals For you guys at more of a startup scale, what kind of cost improvements are you able to get? Is it 5% better, 10%, 50%? Like where does the stablecoins kind of go and help you in terms of your costs and your savings and what you can then pass to
Yeah,
folks?
that's so I'm going to give you, so it depends on the currency, right? So
Yeah.
everything is dependent on the currency. It depends on the corridor as well. So, the payment corridor of where the money's going.
And just
I
just to
would,
interrupt for one
yeah.
second, you mostly are doing stuff between Canada and then any other country. Is that right? Because that's where you have
So right now we're licensed in the country of Canada, across Canada. In
right.
Canada, you need to have two licenses, the federal license, and then Quebec has a provincial license. So
Okay.
we have those two. So our clients need to be Canadian, but they can send money anywhere that's legally allowed. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
going. So Canada to
Yeah.
any place, any currency. Okay.
That's correct. So I would say for an exotic currency like the Brazilian real, probably 30% savings by using stablecoin. And with some of the majors, not as much. I would say maybe 10%, right? As far as savings, for me, but that's significant, right? For a startup. And the way I do business is that I never want to be the institution that's getting the best price, right? I want a price that's fair because I want my banks and my financial services providers, I want them to make money because if they're making money off of me, they're going to be answering the phone when I call, right? The few times that I call. But if I'm able to save, 30% on a particular currency, I have to go that way. It's a no-brainer. But yeah, so that's what it is. It's all about the exotics.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I can tell you about. We can talk about the providers and how they're coming in and differentiating themselves, right?
Interesting.
If you want,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you use like when you're trying to do a kind of exotic pair like that? As a startup, you probably aren't trying to build every step of the way, so you're probably using some different tools, right, that already exist.
Yeah, so it's so very few people talk about this, but it's the company that has the best payment infrastructure with access to the most amount of payment rails. They're the ones that are going to be able to win, right? So, for example, I use a Brazilian bank that is very much technology forward, and stablecoin forward, to be able to buy the Brazilian real using stablecoin and to deliver the fiat currency in Brazil, right, in moments. But there's a number of providers around the world. The big name that no one really talks about is Ripple, right? Ripple has one of the best fiat payout networks globally, you know, and the founder for Ripple lives a couple miles down the street from me here in a very different neighborhood, obviously. But to me, no one's talking about that. People talk a lot about payment aggregators, and there's a number of those out there. But Ripple has quietly been building a phenomenal payout network, right? That can compete with any of the giants.
Nice. Awesome. Well, anything else on the stablecoins? I want to get into your business model a little bit more, but I did want to hit that first. So anything else on that, or should we shift gears into a little bit more about what you're doing?
No, look, I mean, if you were to say, Alfred, give me a parting thought on stablecoin, and what I would say to anyone, either the payment providers or to businesses, is don't disregard it, right? I would say educate yourself on it. You don't need to offer it tomorrow, but know what it does, know how it works, know who the providers are, know what the cost differences are, and see how you can implement it, even if it's just a little piece of your business, right? That's what we're doing. We dipped our toes in. We're not jumping head first because I'm a fiat guy. I understand fiat. I can tell you the best way to move money around the world using fiat and with which partners. But I would be sleeping at the wheel if I didn't see what's coming, you know?
Yep.
And stablecoin is definitely, it's not going to be the future. It's going to be a definite and important part of the future.
Of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what's interesting to us is we hear about, companies like a Bridge or one of these big acquisitions, and we assume that a lot of people are going to be using somebody like that. But it's interesting to think actually, a Brazilian bank has built a better product for your particular needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one example. You'll see examples of that in Nigeria. You'll see examples of that in the UAE. It's just a matter of getting that infrastructure well known and ensuring that they are a safe avenue for the funds to travel, right?
Makes sense. Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit more about then the core of what you're doing, which I think is a bit less about the technology of stablecoins, a little bit more about the business model of FX.
Yeah.
So you're talking about how you want to make sure these different kinds of professionals who help FX transactions happen can do that in a more fair way, get better wages. Is that right?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. Essentially, it's white glove service for for those companies that need cross border payments and just a guidance so that they can eliminate any type of foreign exchange risk that comes from volatility that exists in the market.
Makes sense. And these people who are going to be using your platform, so you're kind of a marketplace. Is that a good way to think about you?
Maybe. I would say I wouldn't put myself as a marketplace, but you could look at me as a Shopify. The same way Shopify gives companies the infrastructure to be able to sell online, Mark Lane gives, entrepreneurs the ability, the infrastructure to be able to have their own foreign exchange company so that they're able to service companies currently in Canada, soon in the US, almost overnight. So I would look at myself as more of a Shopify where I'm an infrastructure play. I do everything but sales and speaking with the clients. Legally, the companies are my clients because I'm the license holder. But in the agreement, our partners, which are the entrepreneurs, they own the client, right? They're able to walk across the street tomorrow if they, for some reason, are unhappy with our product or service. And
Interesting.
I tell people we earn your business one payment at a time.
Yeah. Okay. So more of a Shopify, or I also kind of hear like a broker kind of relationship, although maybe that's a word. I don't know if that's a legal word I shouldn't use for some reason.
No, 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 no. So we're a licensed money services business, and depending where in the world that you're licensed, it's going to depend. In Europe, we would have to be a bank. Just to give you an example, it's a very different type of bank. In Brazil, we would be an FX bank. That only
Mm-hmm.
deals in this little slice, but it's still a bank. It's still regulated by the central bank as we are up in Canada. And in the United States, every state has their own regulation, their own auditors. It's like 50 countries in one. But the I wouldn't say brokerage other than you look at Charles Schwab, Merrill Lynch, Edward Jones, Raymond James, all those individuals that have clients, that are, for their 401ks or for their own personal investments. Most of them don't work for the companies I mentioned. They're entrepreneurs, they're, companies that are offering service through that brand, through that flag, and that's the exact model that we took.
Okay, I tried out marketplace. I tried out broker. We're gonna stick with Shopify, huh? That's a
All
metaphor
right,
that
all right.
seems just to fit, and it's a fun one too because you think of a Shopify or somebody reselling something. You usually, my mind, not being deep in this FX world, usually thinks about something artisanal and kind of niche. But what you're talking about is very different. This kind of money movement. So, what are the big challenges that these people have that makes them want to kind of come into something that feels more of like a Shopify experience versus what would they be doing otherwise? They'd be independently trying to make this work with less tooling.
No, so they'd be working for a company, right? They'd
Okay.
be an employee. And, that's one of so we have four ICPs, right? The ideal client profile. One of our ICPs, actually, I'll talk about two. One is someone that has less than 5 years of foreign exchange experience working at a bank or a broker, already know how to do this. And the other one's someone that has 10 plus years of experience, right? And the reason we're very focused on these two is because we're a startup. So we don't have the infrastructure to train someone, to teach them how to sell. We need someone to come in, they already know what they're doing, and we're able to give them the infrastructure to do that. Those that have a book of business that if they announce on LinkedIn, hey, I just started my new company, that their clients will call them and say, hey, I want to follow you, right? So, but you asked what the biggest, I would say obstacle is, and that's people giving up their full-time job to bet 100% on themselves. And that's scary, right? But we have people that have done that. We have over 20 partners that have signed, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them resigned from their full-time job and they started their own company and they're operating through Mark Lane. But that's the biggest one, right? I'm able to show you on paper, you're able to make 3 times what you're making today if you come over, but you have to risk it. Do you think your clients will follow you from a LinkedIn post? Do you think that you have enough savings to, go 3 to 6 months with less income? That's something that's very scary. But we have individuals in both of those ICPs that are showing that it's possible and successful, right? Our Canadian operation is already profitable, and we haven't even been live for a year. So that just goes to show the testament of this business model working.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's very different than a lot of startups you hear about where it's a long time to get to profitability. But it does sound like for those individuals, it's still pretty scary. So why have these people made a leap, and what prevents other people from not making that leap?
You get to a certain point where you just say enough's enough, right? I'll tell you an experience that I had, and this is not the reason I started Mark Lane, but it was a seed that was planted that became Mark Lane. I used to do a lot of business in Asia, and I was in Guangzhou, China, right in southern China, and it was late at night, and I went into a Taco Bell because sometimes that's what Americans do, right? We go to Taco Bell when we're in China, and I logged on to my bank because my bonus was supposed to come and it wasn't there. So I sent my boss an email. He's like, "That's weird. You're supposed to get that bonus." 3 weeks go by. I finally find out that the executives had made the decision to eliminate all non-standard compensation plans, and mine was one of those, except for no one bothered to tell me or my boss. And at that
Whoops.
moment, no, it's a big deal. But at that moment, I realized I am just another employee. I am a name in a cell on a spreadsheet somewhere. No one cares. At companies, they do not care about the employee as much as they talk about, we're a family here. At the end of the day, it's about one thing, and that's profitability. And I called my wife and I said, "Hey, I'm going to get an MBA." And she says, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because all those geniuses that got rid of my plan, they all had MBAs. So I want to make sure that I'm going to put myself in a position to be able to ensure that I never make that idiotic decision, right? To treat people like that." And that's how I've been. Many times when I'm in the C-suite, I am the only person with sales experience, right? I'm a salesperson that happened to go to MIT, right? To get the MBA. But I'm able to speak up and talk about it from the salesperson's perspective. And that goes a very long way. So someone will come to a moment where they're tired of the bureaucracy, they're tired of the constant compensation plans, and they say, "You know what? If every single company is going to treat me like this, I'm going to give it a shot on my own to see if I can do that." But then again, some people are very happy being miserable. There are some people that complain and complain and complain and never do anything about it, and that's life. And there's other people that, put their foot down and say, "You know what? I deserve to be happy." And when that moment comes, they give us a call and we show them how we can give them the tools to make that happen.
And is that more often a more senior person who's further in their career so they have less risk and more likelihood of that working, or does it work just as well for a junior person?
It works just as well, but I'll tell you, it's the more senior people that show the most hesitation. These are people that have, they have kids in college, they have, a mortgage on their lake house. These are the people that they believe have more to lose. Maybe they're 15 years away from retirement and they don't want to, rock the boat or anything. So we see that hesitation coming from the senior people, but also the junior people. And frankly, you'd be amazed about how many people work paycheck to paycheck, right? It's they don't have that cushion to be able to allow them to go 3 months without income, right? And there's a few things that we're looking at, around that. What can we do to help alleviate that cushion, right? We're experimenting with some things right now, with some partners, but that's my number one obstacle is convincing people to leave their job, and I'm doing air quotes now, safe job, because no job is safe. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, Companies are laying off people by the tens of thousands, right? When a company needs to hit a number, they're going to lay people off. And your safe job all of a sudden, disappears. So at least you cannot fire yourself. So the Mark Lane model is one that can work for anybody.
Nice. Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely seems pretty interesting to try and redo the workforce as a kind of business model innovation. Not something I hear a lot about for startups. Any other kind of stories about that, like things that are keeping you up at night or things that you were surprised at how well they went in that front?
Yeah, that's actually a really interestingly phrased question. Because many things keep me up at night, right? When you know this from experience, but when you're a founder and you're looking at your burn every day, you're looking to find ways to become more efficient. I don't know if that keeps me up at night, but I definitely think about it when I wake up in the morning, when I go to bed. What's been really cool is when we were modeling this out, I expected to use a third party platform for 2 years, right? Because it's exactly what you said. This is a business model innovation. But my co-founder, Dio Sai, he was able to convince me that we're able to build a better system ourselves than what exists out there. And he did it, right? So we have a completely bespoke system for our partners right now. And right now we're going through the design of Path, right? Which is payment and treasury hub. So Path is going to be the system that our corporate clients will be able to use online. And it's a system with features that we believe no one has yet. And we control the entire experience from one end to the other, which is something that a lot of players in the market can't say, which again will give us the ability to scale faster.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's been great to get to hear about your views on the industry, what's going on with Mark Lane. Any parting thoughts about where the FX industry is going, trends that, from your expertise, you might want people to know about, but others who might be newer might not be aware of? Any things of that sort?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question that people ask me when they've never really thought of foreign exchange, they say, why wouldn't I use my bank? Right. And depending on the country, 90% of all companies use their bank. Right. But companies like mine, like the other multi-billion dollar companies that exist for a reason. Canada is a perfect example. In Canada, you're looking at banks charging around $100 a wire. Not all of them, but some banks in Canada are still getting away with $100 a wire, and they're charging 3% spread, right? 3% spread is slightly below what you get at those kiosks at the airport. And the truth of the matter is people don't know that they have options, right? So with someone like Mark Lane, you're able to come in and you're barely at 0.5%, right, of a spread when you're making cross-border payments. We tell people that we can save them around $30,000 for every million that they're sending abroad, right? Just depending on the corridor as well. And people ask, is this a race to zero? And I say no, because not everyone shops at Walmart. If you want the best price every single time, you go to Walmart. But if you want to ask people questions about this product and that product, you're going somewhere else, right? Where they're going to give you, insight. They're going to spend time with you, and that's us. We are not a low-cost provider. We never will be. We're giving white glove services to high net worth individuals and to companies that value that. Our growth figures are showing that we're attracting the Canadian professional to come over, and we're very excited about it.
It's amazing. Yeah, I'm always so amazed when people are profitable or near profitability in their first year of business. So good job.
It's
Yeah.
it's 25 years of working in the corporate world. This is my first startup, right? At 47. 47. I'm going to be 48 in a month. So late 50, late 40s officially, but it's an entire career running P&Ls, ensuring that you're profitable. So I look at growth very differently than someone who, maybe in their early 20s have a ton of money in the bank. My goal is to grow, but to grow in a profitable way. It's just the way that I'm built and that I've been trained, right? I want to show double digit growth, high double digit growth, every quarter while still being profitable, and that's our goal.
Wonderful. Well, let's see. Any other things? I usually have like a question or two I like to ask that's just a bit off topic, a little bit more less about the show or what's happening in the industry. So, any last thoughts about industry or anything on the topic before I go to some closing questions I like to hear?
Man, I almost want to not say anything because I'm super curious about the questions now. But I'll make one more comment, and it goes to something that you said earlier. Artificial intelligence, right? AI, I think it's the great equalizer, right? I'm quoting my co-founder. He told me, Alfred, AI is the great equalizer. A lot of people's jobs are going to disappear and they're not coming back. And they're going to need to reinvent themselves. They're going to need to go out and find a second or third career. And not everyone can be a real estate agent, right? How many people do you know that became real estate agents? So, you and I could probably rattle off 4 or 5 just off the top of our head. Being a foreign exchange professional it's very possible that we're able to make it as ubiquitous as being a realtor. Once we have the training infrastructure up, I view a world where we can have foreign exchange professionals, in Portland, in St. Louis, in Omaha, my home state of Nebraska. I need to give them a shout out, but it's something that you can earn a very solid living. Two populations that I really want to go after are military people that are leaving the military and are trying to enter, the workspace, and women who have taken time away from their career to raise a family. And now 10, 15 years later, they want to have an income, but they want to have an income around their life. And being a partner with Mark Lane gives them the flexibility to do that. And actually, we've been experimenting with that ICP, right? And actually, we out of 6, one's been successful. But from a percentage perspective, I'm very happy with that.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very wild vision. That's what I love about working on startup stuff is you hear things you never would expect to hear, like the new real estate agent 20 years from now might be an FX professional. You heard it here first.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's what's so awesome about living, in a place like San Francisco. You run into, founders who are doing something that you would have fallen asleep listening to, but they make it so exciting, right? There's so much passion there. And all of us at Mark Lane, we share in that passion, and we're super excited about, bringing our vision to reality. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. So the other questions I like to ask are just to get to know someone a little bit better. Is there any books you're reading or any content that you'd recommend people listen? It doesn't have to be all about this industry, just stuff that you're finding exciting.
Yeah. So right now I'm reading a book about the history of China. I like to read 3 nonfiction books, and then I'll read a fiction book, right? So I was talking to my daughter and I said, what book should I read next? And she says, I never hear you talking about China anymore. So I'm reading a history that covers China from, before the Common Era to present day. So that's a book that I'm reading right now. I have ADHD.
What's it called? Do you remember the name?
Yeah, no. It's on my Kindle. Hold on a second here. It's called China, A History by John Key, spelled Key-A-Y. It's a good read. It reads like a novel. I definitely recommend it if anyone is interested. Another book I just finished is called The Algorithm, by John McNeil. John is a fellow Nebraskan, so when I found out that he was from Nebraska, I obviously had to support him. But it's a phenomenal. There aren't many of us out there, right? So whenever you run into a Nebraskan, you almost need to do what you can to support them. Otherwise, we're talking about Henry Fonda and Fred Astaire being fellow Nebraskan. So, but this gentleman worked at Tesla, and he worked at several other, name brand companies, and just the problems that he ran into and how he fixed them, I thought it's just phenomenal. It's really amazing for me to read books, written by business executives that just show you different ways of thinking. And obviously I take a break so that I can one day, if I'm traipsing across China and someone asks me about the Cultural Revolution, which they never will, I'm able to, give them an educated answer.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing some interesting content for folks to check out. I appreciate that. I think China is, on a lot of people's minds these days, so we can always be learning more.
Yeah,
well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, Alfred.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun. I appreciate it.